Welcome to the Artificial Cities podcast, where we will talk about artificial intelligence, technology, policy, sustainability, and so much more. Let's grow one conversation at a time.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. This is Garrett Livingood with the Artificial Cities podcast, and today I have Miss Chandra Farley, and we're going to be discussing what she is doing to help our local communities become more independent, more sustainable with cleaner energy, and actually helping the organizations that are on the ground, grassroots, making this a possibility for us to not be dependent on these unsustainable, centralized systems. So do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know the companies that you're working with, organizations rather, and let's rock and roll. Let's jive.
Let's do it. Thanks so much, Garrett. And thanks to the Artificial Cities podcast. I'm Chandra Farley. I'm the CEO of Resolve Consulting, and I'm also founder of the Good Energy Project.
Love it. So a part of what you're doing with both of these organizations is actually very vital, because you're not only working on the inside of the organizations, helping them make sure that they dot their I's, cross their T's, and have the support that they need in order to have longevity with their company, with your company Resolve. The Good Energy Project, on the other hand, is very niche and specific and directed for the purpose of helping the Black community. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, why don't you, let's do Resolve first.
Okay.
And you can kind of talk about how that is in some way supporting what you're doing with the Good Energy Project, and also independently how it's helping local organizations become stronger in all areas.
Absolutely. So this is a great conversation because this is my third day officially being the CEO of Resolve. I just ended a stint as the Just Energy Director at Partnership for Southern Equity, where I was for 3 years, 8 months.
Congratulations.
But my whole career has been in the nonprofit space related to energy and environment and sustainability. Even prior to that, my background was actually in buildings and residential building construction. And so working on both of those sides, having those connections between the natural environment and the built environment, and always having an affinity for the actual people those buildings shelter and serve. So moving into Resolve and having this experience working in nonprofits, understanding that resources are tight for nonprofits they're so busy doing the work, especially when you're talking about grassroots organizations that we define now, social justice organizations who are out in the community, on the ground, doing the work, mobilizing people, organizing with people. Sometimes your house isn't buttoned up as tight as it needs to be on the operations side, having capacity for communications, having capacity just for taking care of your people through things like benefits and time off, which is critical in this space, to making sure you're taking care of yourself. You know, we hear a lot about self-care. Definitely radical self-care is necessary. So having that experience and working in these kinds of different organizations, even when not my full-time job, I was always a part of like environmental justice organizations. And so seeing those things and having the opportunity to build up my skills in that area, you know, being a project manager of regional and national programs, or leading community level to federal level or state and county, working on these initiatives, you understand the kind of tight infrastructure you need to be effective in your work. And so that is what Resolve is going to focus on, making sure that our frontline organizations, the organizations working in community on the ground, can mobilize the resources they need, activate the partnerships necessary for efficient mission delivery infrastructure.
Well, you know, nonprofits are so intrinsic to basically being the fourth segment of the government. You know, they work, not only do they work directly with government entities, and depending on how it's filed, either they're lobbying or they're actually promoting, because 501c3 technically can't lobby, But they do have there's some loopholes there for sure. Advocacy is a form of lobbying, but it's not directly towards a politician exactly. So, on the other end of the spectrum, it's receiving federal money, state money, local money that is used directly in the community. So these nonprofits are really a leg for the community to stand on, to be able to stand up to the other three legs of the government. So it's an animal that takes a long time to study and understand, but it functions very similar. And even the way you file it, it's very similar to an actual LLC or sole proprietorship. The way you file through the Secretary of State, through the IRS.
Yes.
The main difference is you have your bylaws, which you can critique to make more sense and have more power and be more directive and have more influence on the grants that you write.
Absolutely.
You can also, have your programs, have them running more efficiently, which it seems like what you're doing is helping them on their back end so their programs are not draining money and time and other resources into that back end support that's just can be extremely draining, especially because of the predatory nature of all of these applications and software that can make the job easy but can completely dissolve a budget.
Absolutely.
So I think that is incredibly important with what you're doing with Resolve, and I'm glad that there are companies like yourself that is able to give that type of support, because there's so many people that want to help, but not only do they not know where to go, they don't have any of the management skills that you have developed through time. Now I guess this is a good step over into the Good Energy Project, where, going into the idea of housing and that background of knowledge of understanding how wasteful our modern design for construction is, not only in the layout, but also the actual housing itself. And the materials now more than ever are more restricted more than ever. And so for us to be able to continue to build, we have to be efficient. We have to be smart with the types of wood that we're using, and maybe become creative and implement the use of hemp, which is the most dexterous type of fiber that we have. Incorporating more cement into the actual design to help with the effect of the geothermal energy being able to, not necessarily geothermal, but the efficiency of the energy to not be so wasteful and having to use this dangerous insulation that you can't really even get rid of, that's got filled with asbestos and these things that work, but we've just become so lazy as a system in itself that we have voided the idea of creativity in the space. And I think what you're doing with the Black community is one of the most creative groups of people on this planet. They dominate every creative avenue out there. And so to encourage this group to divulge into the space of, hey, let's support our community, let's get our community off this central system that is incredibly repressive, that they are delegating how much we spend a month. They're literally stealing a percentage of our paychecks that is not only destructive for our families, but destructive to our communities, because they're not even using sustainable systems and renewable systems. So with that preface, let's talk about the Good Energy Project.
Absolutely. Yeah, you touched on a lot, right? And I often talk about my journey to sustainability and to environmental justice as one. I grew up in the country. I grew up in a small town, Gallatin, Tennessee. It's about 40 minutes north of Nashville. And learning there, me and my best friend, my next door neighbor, we used to pick up aluminum cans in the summer and take them to the dump and recycle for candy money. I was the one who started recycling at our house, making my mama and daddy, have the separate bin. And we had a restaurant. That was our family business. And my great-grandparents had a garden. And so at certain times of the year, what we were getting out of the garden is what we were putting in the restaurant, right? That wasn't called farming. to table back then. It was just how you live life. That is how we have grown and evolved, as people. We grow our food, we eat the food we grow, and then we compost the food, right? One of my first jobs was to scrape the food scraps off the plate into the compost bin, and we had cousins, that had a farm, and they would come pick it up and to feed the pigs, so this life cycle being something that is inherent to Black communities, inherent to Indigenous communities, inherent to rural, low-wealth communities as a means of survival, being original conservationist, and being closer and more at one with nature and natural life cycles. And, watching my great-grandmother put the towel at the bottom of the door to, keep the air from going out, right? Or lots of us remember our grandmothers or aunties saying, shut that door, you're letting my air out. Or, yes, right, turn that light off before you leave the room, yes. Right? Or don't leave that water running. All of these things are efficiency, energy efficiency, weatherization, water efficiency, sustainability. But at some point, these strategies have been repackaged and sold back to the very communities who innovated them, who have depended on them. So then it seems like, well, I've always been doing that. I don't need to, pay so much attention to that. I do that already. So I think it's really important that we call attention to owning our culture, as you mentioned. Like, this is inherent to our culture, inherent to who we are, and it is having major impacts on our communities. If we talk about, people say environmental justice, but what we're really talking about is environmental injustice or environmental racism, where we have, Black communities or rural communities who are bearing the brunt of coal plants and now coal ash ponds that are polluting our groundwater. Where else are we supposed to get water? Thinking about these things. And the way we're producing electricity these days is solar technologies. The price has dropped something, I don't know, crazy, like almost 200% or something like that. I may be over exaggerating, but like over the last 10 years. But which has propelled Georgia, where we are, to being a top 10 state for solar, but on the utility scale side. So you can drive through most any highway in Georgia, particularly if you're headed south, and see huge solar farms. And that's very exciting. That is helping us fight back against climate change, reduce things like greenhouse gas emissions. On the flip side of that, Georgia and other southern states consistently rank at the top for what we refer to as energy burden. And that is the ratio of household income, monthly income, to the ratio of monthly utility bills. So the lower a household income and the higher those bills, the higher your energy burden. Georgia, Atlanta specifically, has ranked like in the top 10, the top 5 in the nation for energy burden. And so it's like, on the one hand, we have this really fixable problem, right? We know how to fix energy burden. And then on the other hand, we're a top 10 state for solar. Georgia's a number 1 state to do business, but we have whole entire groups of people who do not have access to the benefits of those technologies. And so when we talk about solar on a residential scale, rooftop to rooftop, let's say, there are many benefits, not only being able to reduce your utility costs, but being able to stabilize your energy costs, not having these huge fluctuations month to month, and being able to project out, let's say, over the life of a solar installation, maybe 15 to 20 years. Solar and other clean energy technologies also bring job opportunities, and these are construction jobs, but also high road, thriving wage, family sustaining jobs, and entrepreneurship opportunities. If you have folks who go take a weatherization training, go through energy auditor training, they can start doing energy audits. I have a friend who started his own company, Costco Jones, with Jones Sustainable Solutions, and Ed Gresham out of Savannah with HDS, and that is exactly what they do. And so they've been great partners to me, to organizations like Partnership for Southern Equity and other organizations in the community, because not only do we have an understanding of the technology, not only are we practitioners of excellence in the practice, we come from these communities. These are our families, these are our friends. This is where we host meetings. And so we're able to be translators, if you will. So people, talking about solar, talking about clean energy, well, what is that really? Right? And so one of the reasons for choosing the name of my personal project, a Good Energy Project, was just to say clean can mean a lot of things. In Georgia, clean includes nuclear because we are building the only nuclear power plant in the nation's history in 30 years. The costs have skyrocketed to be more than the entire state budget of Georgia. And we've all been paying for it for 10 years without getting a single kilowatt hour of electricity from the additions yet. So, and it is increasing our utility rates. So, renewable, can mean different things. And so instead of having to get into the weeds of that, I just wanted a simple hook to speak to a very specific, very powerful group like Black women who are known for being the highest voting bloc. We know that, majority, lots of heads of households, high earners, businesses, any statistic you would like to look at. You can look at a group or a movement and find Black women leading, as historically we have in all social movements, right? And so looking at those two things and my passion and being able to meet, finally moving into this, space and being able to see other women who looked like me, because for a long time, being on the building side of the thing, being on the technical side of things, there weren't a lot of people who looked like me working in these spaces. And because our ability to advance clean energy for healthier communities, wealthier communities, we've got to have that voting power as well. The people who make the decisions, the people who are making, yes, we have the state legislature, and that's very important. But here in Georgia and a lot of other states, they have elected public service commissions. The Public Service Commission in Georgia is a 5-member elected body. They serve 6-year terms. They're staggered every 2 years. And it's a down ballot race, right? So not only do we have work to do around educating people around races and why local races are so important, it's like, hey, scroll all the way down, to the end of the ballot, and there's going to be this race called the Public Service Commission. And I want to make sure people know what that is when they go in the voting box. So they don't just see incumbent next to someone's name and check the box because they're like, well, they've done that job already. I don't really know what this office is.
Right.
Yeah, so we want to be informed and just be good, right? Everybody understands good. So just talking about the Good Energy Project was like, we just want good energy that's healthy, can help our communities advance towards community wealth building. And there's also a double play on that as well. We just, good energy, sitting here with you, we've got some good energy flowing, yoga, health and wellness. We were talking about healthy food earlier. These are all things that bring good energy to us as well. And we need that good energy for ourselves to be able to have the energy to be able to participate in these civic processes that are so important to advancing justice, advancing liberation, advancing self-determination, and in most marginalized communities, particularly Black communities.
Well, yeah, and if you have a whole community of people that are sick, that are poor, they don't have the mental bandwidth to focus on that next area outside of what's in front of what they're looking at.
I gotta
they're
put
looking
gas
at
in the car tomorrow.
They got to make it through the day.
Yeah.
They cannot even imagine trying to be a part of something bigger than just themselves or just their family. And so you're right, to be able to look up and see someone that looks like them gives them the encouragement, it empowers them to be able to stand up and say, hey, we can together. I may have 10 minutes a day for me to share a post, to advocate, to share a dictionary definition of what clean energy is. And I love the idea of the pointing towards nuclear energy, because the only waste that you have from nuclear energy, we are being able to actually recycle that. And so there's a lot of innovation happening in that space in the field of working out. There's workout machines that convert your mechanical energy into electricity. So, encouraging, individuals, hey, quit paying a gym, get you a bike that's going to make electricity at your house. And sure, it might run 3 light bulbs a day.
Right.
But
right.
that's 3 light bulbs that you had to have on. And then you compound on top of that, shutting off the lights. And now you've saved yourself $20 a week. And now, you know what? You now have more than 10 minutes a week to devote towards advocacy. You have an hour. And
Yeah.
so there's a compounding effect of the transcendence of the energetics that's in the social stratosphere of the human race, that once we strive towards good, we can carry with us so much more than what we could have even imagined a decade ago or a
Right.
day ago even.
Right.
So, I fully see, and to dive even deeper into the health, I'm going to do a little shout out to Emmy Henry with Rooted in the Loop. She's got, if I'm not mistaken, you can hate me later for it, but I'm pretty sure it's a vegetarian restaurant she's launched. And, she's really pushing to get her community to start eating healthy because, especially when you talk about eating local, you're eating these vegetables, you're getting you're building a stronger microbiome, which is where your inflammatory response system is able where you're able to kill the inflammatory responses in your system. It's where your immune system is derived from, is your microbiome, and you're eating food from the dirt. It is cultural. It is where we came from. And we've been so disconnected through these facades of what's easy, what's convenient. Run into the convenience store to get something just to fill my stomach, instead of maybe going into ketosis and hydrating and burning some fat, killing some of that inflammation. So the more that we can advocate, we can teach, we can change the philosophy of what it means to be fat to what it means to be healthy.
Right.
And you're seeing that in the hip hop culture. We're seeing people wanting to promote health because, living in poverty, living in unhealth is not cool. And for the longest time, that's
expensive.
the image that they've pushed. Have this specific drink in your hand, is a sign of wealth. And, I was talking with my son this week. He said, Dad, you know what's crazy? At lunch, you can get chocolate milk for free, but you have to pay $1 for a bottle of water.
Wow.
Isn't that so pathetic? That and you can get a fruit juice or regular milk that's highly pasteurized from these cows that are, injected with antibiotics on these farms, that there are like so many levels. And I'm not against milk. I'm not against eating animals, but there's more sustainable, there's better ways to do these lifestyles that we're building. And it really starts with conversation.
Yes.
With one person like yourself standing up and doing all that you can to learn how to merge these industries and break the cycle of how we're trying to engage renewable energy is actually an economic stimulus. Because just because you have solar panels, every 5 years you're going to need new batteries. That's going to need a specialist to come out to hook up, depending on the type of batteries that you use. Mm-hmm. But there's upkeep that is a part of the stimulus. There's further development of adding insulation. I have a friend who runs insulation, and it's crazy how many houses are built without insulation or have deteriorated insulation.
Yeah.
Even considering the destructive nature of a lot of the insulation that's out there. That's a part of innovation, is working with the technology, the resources that you have. And then once you can reach that baseline, you can then pick your head up and look a little bit further out. And then you can start innovating. And then you have time to be creative.
Right.
And then you have time to innovate. And then you can become a leader in your community, which you're obviously doing. So, one thing that Gary Harris brought up, our CEO, he mentioned microgrids. And we need lobbying power in order to enact the ability for us to put up these microgrids, for HOAs to come together and say, hey guys, let's stop with this ignorance of saying that solar panels make our neighborhood look ugly. In fact, right. These solar panels make our neighborhood look sexy. and it starts with that philosophy of changing of what we value. Do we value the convenience store, or do we value spending more time with our family, spending less time on the road, spending more time with our hands in the dirt, getting more vitamin D, especially for the Black community who has a harder time absorbing vitamin D. So they need more time outside in order to get more vitamin D. And so there's so many ways that we can engage the conversation where it's promoting good things, and too often we get caught, like even myself, I'm afraid to sometimes even mention saying the word Black community, even though like I'm complimenting and I'm promoting it. And so we have to break these boundaries that society has put up, that has put us at wars.
Yes.
And I love the fact you included the rural communities, because it very much so is more of a socioeconomic class that's being neglected.
Yes.
Now that socioeconomic class has a disproportion of ethnic groups in it, but it isn't just one group. But the fact of the matter is, in business, you have to niche. And that's what you've done. And you've chosen a very smart niche to choose, because the Black women have been leaders in our communities since ever. Yeah. The foundation. Mm-hmm. And so I think what you're doing is not only important and vital, but transformative. Because we do have these systems like Atlanta that's already designed, where I guess the saying was, I don't know who it was, but whoever designed the roads of Atlanta just spit out a can of their dip in their mouth, and everywhere they spit it out, they put a road. And that's really how it feels like, because there's not much intelligent design around here.
Right.
But we still have rooftop space. You know, we could still paint our roads white, so that way there's less heat coming from the actual roads themselves, which reduces the overall energy costs in the areas. Mm-hmm. You know, we could still replace all the gym's workout equipment with workout equipment that transfers our mechanical energy into, you know, electricity. We can do little things. We can put up smart lights, so that way they're not just wasting energy all the time. They're not forcing cars to sit there while no one's coming. You know, we can do little steps that, you know, yes, is an investment, but it's an investment for longevity purposes, for the micro that ends up across the spectrum becoming the macro. I think one of the points recently was, you know, whenever you have a single situation, it's not data. But whenever you have a lot of situations, you have data. And that's one thing that Artificial Cities is focused on, is looking at the data and figuring out, you know, how can we make our roads safer? How can we lower the energy costs on a policy level, on a personal level, you know, and how can we work and advocate with individuals like yourself to be able to seed these conversations, advocate, which advocacy always says a fancy word for marketing. So we can help advocate with these, you know, transformative individuals in our communities that, you know, when we pick our head up, we see a Chandra Farley in Cobb County. Then we see one in a rural district in Alabama. Then we see one in New York City. And then we have the collaborative effort to say, hey, you know, we might be the ants, but together we can build our own mound, our own community. And we don't have to bow down and continue to lay down to these centralized systems as they take advantage of us. We can stand up to them, we can fight them, and we have the capacity, because you're right, voting is very essential. But a big problem that we have with voting is, who do we vote for? I mean, we have these politicians putting out millions of dollars worth of signs with one website page with 5 talking points about what they stand for. And it's like, how about we engage in dialogue? How about we find those that really stand for something, you know, that is going to stand up for the people, that's going to stand up for what's most right, that's going to stand up for real science, not mainstream science, but real science, real data that we can pull out and we can say, hey, people in this area have poverty to this level. How can we bring them up? How can we bring jobs to them? How can we build their infrastructure so it's cheaper? You know, there's 2 ways to work a budget. You can save on what you expend on, or you can make more money. Mm-hmm. So from that dimension, you know, taking your 2 organizations that you're working with and working on and that you've built, you're working on both dimensions of that to help these organizations save their money, become more effective, efficient, while also innovating on the other end of the spectrum, inspiring the individuals to stand up against these beasts that be and actually change and really hold these power companies accountable. Because you're right, we've been spending years and years of money on this development of this nuclear energy that we still haven't seen. And it's like, is this for show? Is this real? Where's the accountability? And Artificial Cities is here to hold that accountability to the elected officials, as saying, no, we're not spending another dollar on your nuclear energy. We're going to build our own microgrids. When you have your nuclear energy, you come to us and you let us know, because we're done being taken advantage of. I don't know if you've ever had a business that kept taking money from you, didn't produce anything. I know Gary's talked about it. He said, Gary, you produce content. You're doing something, you know. But too often, you know, you have clients where people aren't doing something, and they say a lot, they talk a big game, but they can't see the big picture. And so to have you paint that picture is quintessential for the future development of not only our communities, but this country and this world. So, you know, I want to hear, you know, a little bit more, some I guess we're probably getting a little close on our time. Where are we at? We got a little bit more? Okay, perfect. So, you know, how are ways that we can help you? You know, what are your links? What are some, you know, beyond donation, you know, sharing your content, you know, inviting you to speak. So kind of, enlighten us on how we can help you further your mission.
So first things first, everyone, I like to quote one of my mentors and elders, Dr. Mildred McLean. She is a 30-year veteran of the environmental justice movement and founded Harambe House Citizens for Environmental Justice in Savannah, Georgia. And she says, we always like to have a call to action, you know, with events and education, and it's just find your justice home. So the way people can help me is to find a place to get plugged in and get in the fight to do some work, you know, whether it's your church, whether it's your local NAACP, whether it's your Rotary Club. All of these places have people who just aren't thinking about these things, you know. Reach out to me. I'd be happy to help with an Energy 101. You know, I always say to people, like, they give me these 80-page reports and case studies. I'm like, I need a one-pager and a slide. You know, it's okay if it's front and back, because somebody said to me the other day, and I'm like, no, I know, it's a lot of information. So that's where to start. Helping me is helping you, right? Helping you is, you know, speaking up about something, or, hey, have we thought about this? Our community anchors, our institutions, we just have to start the conversation. Because it's just a lot of things people don't, you know, talk about. We were talking before, sometimes the only time people think about energy maybe is when they get the light bill or when they get the gas bill. You can either pay it and you're not really thinking about it, or you can't pay it and you're worried about how you're going to keep the lights on. Not just for this month, but then you got to worry about it again next month. So just start small. Start where you are and ask a question. You know, how much is your utility bill? We also have to normalize talking about these things, first of all. There is a lot of shame when we talk about not being able to pay a bill. There's a lot, you know, well, why can't you? Aren't you working hard enough? Or it becomes something that becomes our fault versus systemic oppressive systems who are keeping us in this loop and barring us from the very opportunities that, like there are with clean energy, like there are with renewable energy technologies, that allow us an opportunity to be the masters of our own destiny, right? Really realizing a future of what a lot of colleagues and I are talking about is energy democracy. You know, this term where energy is commons, microgrids in our communities. If somebody can't have solar on their roof because it's going to cost $30,000 for a roof, that's all right. There's a small-scale solar farm across the street that we can get energy from. But that takes political will, and that takes political power, and that takes people raising their voice. So voting is important, but you got to know who those candidates are.
Right.
We've got to study. It takes a lot, and we have a lot of offices and lots of commissions. So I focus on voter education, specifically around the Public Service Commission. Oh, your bill was really high last month? Well, let's look at it. It's like, oh, wow, do you know there are 5 people who are elected in Georgia who are making that decision for you? Well, their office is at 244 Washington Street in downtown Atlanta, and they might be open now, but you can call them and you can email them. The meetings are on YouTube now, every couple of weeks. You can go there, Public Service Commission website. So that's to get involved where you are, to get active, in voting at all levels of government, not just the federal stuff, but your local, so your county commission, the Public Service Commission, the Labor Commission. And then 3, you can follow the Good Energy Project on Instagram. I would love that. It's brand new, so I would love to have more and trying to get engaged in some content development. I do speaking quite a bit, so happy to do that. And you can catch up with Resolve online. And all of those things are on my LinkedIn page. So you can go to LinkedIn and Chandra Farley, and you can find all the links to those there.
Yeah, content is king, isn't it?
So I hear.
Yeah, we'll see.
It's gonna be queen.
Oh, I love it.
It's gonna be queen when I finally get to it.
That's huge. So I think that you're 100% right that, I think Howard Zinn has a quote that says, we have enough of a democracy here to still make a change. And as much as we want to talk about, the corruption in the voter system on both sides, with both segments of arguments to be had, there's enough of a system here where we can't deny, if we get together and we elect someone, especially on a local level, that we can't take control of our local communities. And, it's a shame that there are these barriers in front of us that's making it more difficult. It's no excuse to not keep working, to keep building a system independently and gathering and advocating and educating, because, education is the key foundation to building a stronger society. And if a society doesn't understand what that bag of chips is doing to them, if they don't understand what, that gas mileage is doing to them, or, leaving that door open is doing to them, I mean, you would be surprised. I have a niece who, she moved out from her house and she was complaining about the energy bill, and my sibling was like, hey, 'cause I don't want to use which niece, so I don't want to point her out, but he was like, when you keep it really cold, it costs a lot of money. And she said, really? And he was like, yeah, that's why I was always telling you quit turning the temperature down, because it costs a lot of money. So, there are some basic things that we don't understand. Or maybe you have a leak in your refrigeration, or in your refrigerant, and you're spending a lot more energy to cool down your system because that closed loop system is now open and it's spewing out energy, and now you have less refrigerant, which is now having to use more energy, more fan power to use the compression rate to make that energy, to blow out that hot or blow out the cold, depending on if it's summer or winter.
Great images of dollar bills flying out windows and flying outdoors, and that's a good attention getter, particularly at the residential level, at the household level, because that residential households are own little microcosms. When we start to join together, those are definitely the places, because you can talk to your neighbor. Hey man, my bill was, especially now where everybody's houses are very similar, right. Production building and things like that, depending on where you build. Hey man, or hey girl, my bill is your bill this high? And it's like, no, because I did X, Y, and Z. It's like, oh wow, you did, And I've been in community meetings where that happens, where we've brought, a group of people together and their neighbors, and some, we'll be talking about energy efficiency or weatherization, and some will say, oh yeah, I did that because I found out about this. And at one point he was like, I didn't know you did that. And it's just, we just go all day. And we are a consumer class now. We are a people of convenience. We flip on the light switch and we expect the light to come on. If it doesn't, it's either my bulb is burnt out, or I forgot to pay that bill, right? And then we just fix the problem versus, going further. And there are a lot of different ways that people are thinking about these things, but we just want to have more intentional conversation to make the links and the connections to the bigger picture.
Right, right. And I see what you're doing. I love what you're doing. I know typically we end these talks with a little question with Mr. Gary. So what you got for us, buddy?
Well, as usual, I'm always asking those questions around, those marginalized communities, especially when you talk about something like solar power and things like that. Because obviously, if it was so affordable, everyone would, I guess, have it, right? I guess that's the theory, right? So when you have these families who are in those rural areas, marginalized, say communities, and they need more affordable energy, is there a real path or a path that's laid out or that can be laid out in some way, or that's in your mind, or through certain groups to get those communities access to more affordable energy?
Yeah, so I believe in progression, and I think it's always important to remember progression. I'm a former cheerleading coach. You have different steps that you do so you can stand on the ground before you can stand on somebody's hands. So step one with talking about the cleanest energy is the energy that you don't use, first and foremost. So we have to start with weatherization, which helps us conserve. We have to start with energy efficiency. Particularly here in Georgia, because of a lot of the regulatory barriers that we have for homes to have rooftop solar. Also, lots of houses aren't ready. So particularly when we're talking about marginalized groups, it's older infrastructure. So all of a sudden, it's like you also don't want to jump to solar if your house isn't absolutely as energy efficient as it could be, because then you don't want somebody, you don't want to get a system bigger than you need, because then it's more expensive, right? So you want to make sure it's sized properly. So when we have to, and that is the awareness building that we're talking about. So weatherization, energy efficiency, then does solar make sense? Pairing that with batteries. I mean, we are entering, the South is home to the most billion-dollar climate and weather disaster events in the nation. That is a reality. And we saw in Texas, in Florida a couple of years before, people who had EVs or batteries in their homes, they made it through. They were plugging up a few minutes at a time and running the heat a little bit at a time because they had that backup power. So, again, going through those steps, and at every single one of those steps, we have to have people ready to activate their communities, their churches, their neighbors to go speak up in these decision-making arenas. So we can say, you know what, I've done everything on my house. My house is as energy efficient as possible, and I wanted to put solar on my house, but there were no incentives in place like there are for gas, like there are, for, other fossil fuel based, technologies that we're still depending on this infrastructure for. Or, hey, I saw this program, Solar Energy Loan Fund, who's been doing great work in Florida, working specifically on barriers to people who are considered low income or income qualified who can't meet those solar barriers. Let's bring that to Georgia. They're just here now. So how do we make sure we have really innovative companies with really innovative models to attack it at all sides? We've got the education and awareness, we've got the physical infrastructure, and then we have to have the financial mechanisms to make it happen. And at every single point of those, there is an informed, activated group of people required to help us advance and demand the political will for what we are asking.
Well, I wanted to add, so obviously you have a large population of what I would say renters, let's say, right? So I want to move from not just those who own homes, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of us at one point in our time, we were renters, or we could have had a family and we were renting, right? And you have these homeowners or companies, let's say they own a 300 unit apartment complex, whatever. What incentive is there for them to put, solar panels or something on their apartment complexes, or become more energy like efficient, and they just like said, like collecting rent. They can just raise rent, right? I mean, so what do those dynamics look like? Because we all started out some ways renters. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. There are a lot of dynamics, and we do have to come up with more incentives. Earlier, we talked about energy burden, and the majority of people who are energy burdened are renters, right? And we do have a big issue with its industry speak, I guess, is split incentives, right? The landlords don't necessarily want to make the improvements because they cost money and they don't see the benefit. The homeowner, the renters don't understand the benefits they could get from doing small improvements in their home, and they don't own it and could be moving in a couple of months. So what's the reason to do it? So there does need to be more advocacy, and there do need to be more policy levers created and enforced at that landlord-renter level, particularly for our smaller landlords, right? We have the big 300, corporate production builders who are moving towards things like all electric buildings, right? Things like that where renters aren't burdened by two deposits. Okay, now I can just get my electricity turned on. I don't also have to try to worry about having gas, in the winter, or another bill, and even paying for it in the summer when I'm not using it. Because if I turn it off, then I'm going to have to try to go through the credit process again to get approved. So there are a lot of benefits in the new buildings that are, all electric. But again, those are the big folks who we expect to be on the front end, of building industry, and they're able to do that. But I think we have to look a whole lot more at subsidized housing. Folks like my daddy, who used to buy a house here and there in our hometown and rent them out, to people at our church, or, people at our restaurant. There are people whose retirement, or life is the income from 5 or 6 properties, that they own. So how do we get messaging to those folks whose family members are the people we are talking about? And they themselves could be energy burdened, right? The folks who are living in their households are energy burdened. So again, what are the policy levers to drive some incentive and some investment to partner with them and say, hey, this really is to your benefit. And hey, if you do make these improvements, here's a way we can work together with city government or county government to get you to agree to not raise your rent, so we can maintain affordable housing, naturally occurring affordable housing, right? Not something new you have to build, but these single family homes, these 4-6 unit duplexes that just need to be brought up to beyond the code, healthy building standards, right? Because an energy efficient home is a healthy home.
Yeah, I would say that advocacy and education is huge. Having engineers actually consider, solar, even smaller wind turbines to be used on the property to measure the BTU of the unit. So that way they can say, hey, it's going to cost $1 million for us to install, 100 AC units, or we could spend $500,000 and then maybe $250,000 and use the mixed use, whereby we can actually make this more efficient in the long term as we develop. So getting engineers, getting the educated class on board to understanding how we can make this work. The math does work out, and you're right. It's about half as expensive as it was back in 2014. I did a project on solar, and for it to be like 100% efficient, which you kind of have to use mixed use, but on average, it's about half as expensive as it was, just 7 years ago. So, I think you're spot on with trying to open up that dialogue of how do we get into these parts that where the renters are at, but even a deeper point of that conversation, which really goes into the socioeconomic conversation of how can we help these people buy homes? How can we create sustainable jobs so they can hold a career for more than 2 years that makes enough money, so now they can own their own property and they can become, take a step up in their socioeconomic class and actually be able to have more and empower them so that way they can, take control of where their money is going. So I think that's kind of a two-part conversation of education, advocacy, getting those in the field of HVACR involved with how can we make this make sense on a mathematical term? Because some people don't speak creative. Some people don't speak environment. Some people speak, logical money only. And so to open up the dialogue and to put it in more points of terminologies that really speaks to everyone, which is what you've done in terms of creating a micro niche with the Good Energy Project of talking to a specific group of people. We have to talk to people, and not everyone speaks the same language. Not everyone has the same incentives, the same mindset, the same goals in mind, but good is a very simple concept, and we can all agree that, wouldn't it be great in 10 years if none of us had an electric bill? Wouldn't it be great in 10 years if we didn't have any, problems with our well water being tainted from the coal ash, especially up in Bartow County, where you have a lot of cancer popping up because, and I'm not going to say because of any one thing, but Georgia Power, but Plant Moen's right there. And so there's a lot of conversations that we can kind of point towards and say, hey, there's some science here. Hey, here's some math. Hey, here's some philosophy. Hey, here's some directional terms that really can talk to exactly each person and really not speak past people, because a lot of times that's what happens is we're passionate about something and we have our mind made up and we talk past someone. And then we get ignored, we leave out the economic stimulus from it. And so now people are like, well, what about all these jobs? Like, no. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. There's jobs to come with this. HVACR is still going to be here. Electricians, welders, installers. There's so many jobs that are going to come from this, even on the industry level of developing these things. The innovation that can come of making wind turbines more efficient. Bringing that into the entrepreneurial side of having people design new mechanisms, new installation methods. There's a lot to empower the individuals to use all the frameworks to reach everyone. So Benny, do you got anything for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one question. We have quite a few seniors who are economically challenged. How do they play a part in this? Because we always ask our seniors to come out and vote and come to the meetings and come to this and come to that, but we don't really involve them in the process. So how can they play a part in seeking this clean energy and in welcoming this clean energy into Atlanta? Yeah,
starting the conversation. Seniors, especially senior Black women, are the most dependable activists and partners that I have had, for sure. They're going to come to the meetings. They're going to bring somebody with them, and bringing that new information to them. And like we spoke about earlier, reminding them that these are things they are already doing and did for years. Putting the towel at the bottom of the door so the air wasn't, going out. Making sure that, the curtains were closed when the sun was coming in so it didn't get too hot in the house. Reconnecting with them in this plain language, lived experience manner, which is why organizing and, people working on the ground, talking to people. I may not say, hey, I want to come have a conversation with you about clean energy. I'm going to say, hey, can I come sit down and meet you in your group for lunch, wherever y'all are having it? And whatever we're going to talk about is whatever we're going to talk about. And then they're going to say, well, hey, baby, tell us a little bit about you. And that is the conversation starter. We Even, at Partnership for Southern Equity, one of our core things, that I would stress to people is when we were partnering with Fort Valley, Georgia, or Albany, Georgia, or going outside of the metro, or in NPUV if in Metro Atlanta, it wasn't, those first conversations necessarily weren't about energy specifically, right? We called them chat and choose, which we all do, which is exactly what it said. Sit down over some food, which is the ultimate uniter, and chat. And whatever came up is whatever came up. And as an organization, as coalition partners, just about whatever the issue was, there was going to be someone that we could connect them with. There was going to be an action, that we could relay to them to take. And so that is the beginning of building relationships. We just want to reconnect with each other. We want to have good, strong, healthy relationships, which will ultimately move us toward having good, healthy energy, right?
It was a really good question because I actually got in an argument with someone on Nextdoor about investing. It might have even been Facebook. I don't know, but social media site about an elderly person arguing about, why would they invest in this solar energy, because they're not looking 30 years out. But this is where, social media conversations have their limitations, because you can't talk to someone. You're talking through a medium that really, it breaks the conversation down, where it's people talking at each other and they're not really listening. And so, she has a valid point. But in regards of talking to them and actually engaging that dialogue, what about their grandkids? What about just trying to eat healthy, getting them outside, because them getting their cardiovascular system out, gardening, because a lot of them love gardening. It's nostalgic. It's going to get them that vitamin D. It's going to get them, their fingernails in the dirt, which is going to introduce bacteria into their system in a healthy manner. That's going to increase their immune system. It's going to get them breathing hard and preventing that pneumonia from setting. It's a lot of things, but because what you're doing is multifaceted, it's focused on just the good. There is a conversation to have with everyone that we can all agree on, and there's ways to engage that conversation. Like, look, invest into this house because this house is going to go to your grandkids. And if you can make this house sustainable for your grandkids, they're not going to be, having to live under the demise of this centralized system that really doesn't care about them. And so, when you open up the conversation to be on just the monetary conversation, which is, how they're trying to think about it. How do I make this make sense for my money? Because they're going to come out of pocket $20,000. That's part of their retirement. And they don't want to. It's like, no. This is for your kids. This is for the next generation, so they can live a better life than the hard life that you lived, because you don't want your kids to live what you lived through, And so you can engage everyone individually. And this is why it's important to have that wide spectrum of understanding of what good is, of what health is. Because the less asthma we have in our city, which you had mentioned about, increased CO2, increased, coal plants, have all these issues with not clean energy, then you having cleaner filters in the households, these little things, they go so far. And really do touch everyone's heart and soul. It's just a matter of having someone like yourself that's so charismatic and so knowledgeable that you can make the conversation reach every single person, because you really do understand it. So understanding is really the after effect of advocacy. So, advocating, inspiring, that's the goal of what our podcast is about, because we want to inspire people to not be afraid of what a smart city is, because there is fear that comes with that. But what they're not looking at is the actual power you get whenever you break away from the system and you can become sustainable and you can spend more time with your kids. I wish so bad that I had the time to homeschool my son and have a homeschooling community just in his own neighborhood of kids that could just not be dependent and still utilizing, there's value to that centralized system, and not depleting it entirely, but working with it and balancing that effect, where when we have a surplus of resources, it can go back into those that need it more. And so, it really is a deeper conversation of understanding of inspiring, advocating, and you're doing all of that. And I just want to thank you for your time, for your work, because I know at times when you're running on fumes, it feels like you ain't going nowhere, but I guarantee you what you're doing is a spark that will light across the whole world. And I want to encourage you to keep going and keep that drive inside of you and keep that fire lit, because the change is coming and you're on the front end of it. So
Thank you so much, Garrett. I appreciate that. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Benny. Thank you, Michael. It's been great being in conversation with y'all, and I look forward to staying engaged. You know, we've got a huge 2022 coming up in Georgia, plenty of races, and also 2 Public Service Commission races are going to be on the ballot. So let's get to work. Let's engage some voters, and let's make some connections. You know, have some chat and chews of our own to get out and keep getting the message out, because it's gonna take all of us.
It does. And, you know, for the entrepreneurs out there, for the engineers, for the people that, you know, can help, you know, produce data, engage your politicians that are here now, and enlighten them. Sometimes it's just ignorance, and they don't know. And so, you know, beyond just your voting power, your education, your advocacy, the work that you do, it adds up. It's cumulative. This world is a cumulative thing. We are where we are because of our past, and it's only going to take us to a better place as long as we can bring that with us. So much love, guys. I appreciate y'all's time. I look forward to the next conversation. I love to talk, and I love conversation. So let's keep it going. Much love, guys.